Rika Mitra, Ramarao also reported that when they saw the picture of Suchir's body, there seemed to be evidence of someone spitting and coughing blood outside of the bathroom. So, how could that have happened? Finally, they claimed that the autopsy showed an impossible bullet travel path for a self-unaliving, and this was also disputed by their lawyer. Suchir's parents theorized that their son was attacked from behind while he was listening to music and cleaning his teeth, and his head was smashed into the wall or cabinet. Ramarao explained this in greater detail during her interview with Tucker Carlson. Take a look.
You also said, if I heard you correctly, that...
Welcome to Black Files Unlocked, where we explore crime, conspiracy, and hidden history through video analysis and review. This is the conspiracy side of things. Tonight, we're opening a file that's as troubling as it is mysterious and viewing a story presented by YouTuber Colin Browen, the tragic passing of Suchir Balaji, a former researcher at OpenAI. According to sources, Suchir died by unaliving himself in his San Francisco apartment on November 26, 2024, shortly after raising serious concerns about OpenAI's data training practices. But that's where things get strange. Colin's segment suggests there's more here than meets the eye. A young man, brilliant, driven, and working inside one of the most powerful AI companies. Because this wasn't just any employee. According to claims, this man allegedly discovered something he wasn't supposed to know. Something he may have tried to warn people about. But before he could speak, he was gone.
Yeah, so who was he? What did he know? And why is this story barely a whisper in the mainstream? We're not saying we know what happened, but we are saying this: the pieces don't add up. And where there are gaps, power usually fills them. So tonight we're viewing the facts, the rumors, and the chilling implications of this story. If you're here to question the narrative, follow the shadows, and pull the threads the media left hanging, welcome, you're one of us. This is Black Files Unlocked. Let's begin.
Whistleblower Suchir Balaji. In October of 2024, just last year, Suchir went public with information against his former employer, OpenAI, and was planning to testify against them. If you don't know, OpenAI is the parent company of a software we're all quite familiar with, ChatGPT, which is a generative artificial intelligence chatbot that was launched in 2022 and became the fastest growing consumer software application in history, gaining over 100 million users in only 2 months. But in November of 2024, young Suchir was found dead in his California apartment, just days after his 26th birthday, and shortly before he was set to testify in a case against his former employer. Today, we're going to discuss Suchir's life and his career, his employment at OpenAI, his mysterious death, and the series of inconsistencies surrounding it. And let me tell you, there are just so many. There's no way to look at this thing, in my opinion, in any other way other than cold-blooded murder. This show is going to completely open your mind, and I don't know if y'all are ready for this. Anyways, let's get into it. My name's Colin Browen. Welcome to the Conspiracy Files. So before we get into today's show, all parties are considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Everything that we're covering today is all alleged. So I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody or suggesting anybody, played a part in anything. But yeah, these are all allegations that we're covering today. It's some pretty disturbing, deep, dark stuff. But I want you to keep that in mind, that none of this is technically officially proven. All the opinions presented on today's show are solely mine, Colin Browen, the host and producer of The Conspiracy Files. And yeah, I'm not planning on, going anywhere or doing anything. Actually, today I'm leaving for a foreign country to do something that is pretty incredibly dangerous. So it's a very prescient time to issue a warning like that. We're going to be knocking on some doors and investigating some things over there with the film crew for a project that I've been working on for 8 months. So yeah, a lot of people, I've seen, I read comments. A lot of you guys are so incredibly nice, and I love each and every one of you that tune in every week to enjoy the show and do deep dives into these historical events with me. But I have seen some people say, he's being over dramatic and he's no Gary Caradori, essentially. But this stuff's real. Like, my entire family is very, very afraid for what I'm doing. Today my wife has told me she really does not want me to go do this at all. And it's like, our producer, his grandmother said, "You're insane for doing this." Our author who we're working with, his girlfriend said, you know, you guys are absolutely crazy. We've received a lot of warnings, and the authors that I've worked with and the victims over the years have all told me, you know, this is real. And when you study these stories, there are a lot of people that die. I mean, just look at today's story. This is another one of those mysterious deaths. This isn't a phenomenon that was limited to, you know, the 1970s and 80s. These are deaths and mysterious demises that continue to happen to this day. So I just say that as, you know, some form of a blanket statement that I know that it's going to be impossible to figure out who did what, but I genuinely do get concerned sometimes. And I have gotten death threats. People have messaged me death threats. I've gotten emailed death threats. I've got the evidence of all of it. I've turned stuff over to the authorities a couple of times because it's been very extreme, like threatening my wife and my pets. So the authenticity of those claims, I don't really know. Could just be someone, you know, messing around, but I don't play around with my wife and my animals and all of that. So yeah, let's just, without further ado, let's get into this. Suchir Balaji was born on November 21st, 1998 to Purnima Ramarao and Balaji Ramamurthy, and grew up in Cupertino, California, where both of his parents worked in the technology sector. Suchir was a prodigy from a young age. He spoke his mom's name at just 3 months old, he knew the entire alphabet by 12 months, and at 18 months, he would ask his mom to light a lamp to cheer him up. Incredibly, he was able to recognize words at 20 months, and he went on to have a knack for technology, math, and computing, evidenced by his schoolwork. By age 11, Suchir had even started coding with the children's educational tool Scratch, and by 13, he had built his own computer. So by 13 years old, Suchir had built his own computer. So it's obvious the kid was an absolutely super genius style whiz kid. Like, he was speaking early, he was learning about the world early, he knew his early, and he would only go on to do greater things. Suchir attended Monte Vista High School in Cupertino, California, and he was a shy but kind student, careful to involve himself in many extracurriculars. He was a finalist for the 2015-2016 season of the United States of America Computing Olympiad, and in 2017, he ranked 7th place in a Kaggle passenger screening algorithm challenge sponsored by the TSA, for which he earned $100,000. He used synthetic data and cross-image analysis to produce more robust predictions. He also won first place in both the 2017 Pacific Northwest Regional and Berkeley Programming contests and placed 31st in the ACM International Collegiate Programming Contest 2018 World Finals. Keep in mind, this is all while he's a teenager. When Suchir was only 14, he wrote an extensive paper about chip design, and at 17, he took a gap year to work as a software developer at Quora, an American social question and answer website and online knowledge market. Following his gap year, Suchir attended and graduated from the University of Berkeley with a Bachelor's of Arts in Computer Science, and while in college, he interned at Scale AI in 2019 and subsequently joined OpenAI upon his graduation in 2021. John Schulman, a co-founder of OpenAI, recruited Suchir right out of college. He spent nearly 4 years working at the company as an artificial intelligence researcher, and amongst other projects, he was involved in gathering and organizing the internet data used to train GPT-4, a language model used by the company's online chatbot, ChatGPT. He also worked on a precursor model called WebGPT. However, in 2024, August, Suchir left the company after becoming disillusioned with its business practices. He said at the time, quote, "If you believe what I believe, you have to just leave the company." And he also said that he felt AI is a harm to humanity. John Schulman also stated that Suchir had told him of his plans to leave OpenAI, and that Suchir didn't think that better than human AI, known as artificial general intelligence, was right around the corner, like the rest of the company seemed to believe. After leaving OpenAI, Suchir started focusing on personal projects. According to one interview with his mother, he planned to create a nonprofit centered on machine learning and neurosciences. So as you can see here through painting this picture, Suchir was an absolutely astounding, hardworking young man. He was incredibly smart, he was incredibly talented, but he left OpenAI because, according to him, he had seen some things that he probably shouldn't have seen, and it was haunting him. And then came the whistleblowing. In an October 2024 New York Times interview, Suchir alleged that products like ChatGPT violated United States copyright laws because they're trained on the products of their business competitors. The chatbot's outputs can then imitate and substitute those products through its method of ingesting vast sums of online content to train its models. Suchir said that ChatGPT and similar chatbots are ruining the commercial viability of the individuals and organizations who produce the data that the AI systems systems are trained on. He also went on to write his own personal essay regarding his thoughts, published on his blog later that week, and later even picked up by the New York Times, titled, "When Does Generative AI Qualify for Fair Use?" In this essay, he mathematically analyzed outputs of large language models such as ChatGPT and argued that they failed the four-factor test for determining fair use under US law. The four-factor test was based on the following. 1. The purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or is for nonprofit educational purposes. 2. The nature of the copyrighted work. 3. The amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole. And 4. The effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. Now, I'm pretty experienced with fair use. YouTube definitely doesn't have its figured out with that because they will copyright you for the most banal things that fall under fair use. So I'd love love for someone to start a lawsuit against them, especially if you're watching the show on there. You know that I've had plenty of problems on this platform. But in relation to those four factors, in his essay, Suchir made the following points about ChatGPT and OpenAI. He said that ChatGPT, as a profit-driven product, cannot qualify for fair use as its development relies heavily on copyrighted material. Although less significant legally, he also pointed out that generative AI often disregards the protective boundaries of highly copyrighted works, just like the internet does. While AI models avoid replicating data outright, Suchir critiqued their selective borrowing, which skirted legal definitions of substantiality. He also emphasized that OpenAI and other companies have signed licensing agreements with platforms like Reddit, Stack Overflow, and the Associated Press, proving that a data licensing market does exist. And finally, using copyrighted data without such agreements not only bypasses compensation for rights holders, but also creates market harm, a central argument that exists within copyright law. Suchir also further suggested that the argument could be applied to other generative artificial intelligence products as well. So that was his argument, basically, that OpenAI, in a nutshell, was stealing data and using it to gain an up on the market. It's a somewhat complicated subject, but he was alleging that they were committing some sort of crime, essentially, violating US copyright law. But Suchir was met with criticism. Attorney Bradley Hulbert told Fortune magazine that Suchir Balaji's essay, quote, read like the argument of a really smart non-lawyer who read up on the subject but does not have a thorough understanding, end quote. Another IP attorney, quoted anonymously by the magazine, said that Suchir's analysis, quote, misunderstands the law in some fundamental ways, end quote. Around the same time that Suchir's article and blog post were published, OpenAI was being sued for copyright infringement by prominent authors and news publishers, including the New York Times. In Suchir's final post on X in October of 2024, he stated, quote, I initially didn't know much about copyright, fair use, etc., but became curious after seeing all the lawsuits filed against Gen AI companies. When I tried to understand the issue better, I eventually came to the conclusion that fair use seems like a pretty implausible defense for a lot of generative AI products, for the basic reason that they can create substitutes that compete with the data they're trained on. I've written up the more detailed reasons for why I believe this in my post. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but I still feel like it's important for even non-lawyers to understand the law, both the letter of it and also why it's actually there in the first place, end quote. He also clarified that the New York Times did not reach out to him. He reached out to them as he thought he had a, quote, interesting perspective, end quote. In a November 18, 2024 court filing, Suchir was identified by the New York Times' attorneys as one of a number of people who might have, quote, relevant documents, end quote, in the copyright case against OpenAI. Several of the people named in the news service's court filings as potentially having relevant documents were former or current OpenAI employees, not just Suchir. Suchir had said that he would testify against the AI company, but unlike other OpenAI whistleblowers, Suchir did not reveal any new information about the company at that time. The New York Times article also cited Stanford University law professor Mark Lemley, who disagreed that generative AI services violate copyright law, and intellectual property attorney Hulbert, who said a new law might be necessary to settle the question of legality. Additionally, OpenAI argued that its software was grounded in fair use and related international copyright principles that are fair for creators and support innovation, and was trained on publicly available data. So at the time Suchir is published in the New York Times, he's making these allegations, he's writing these essays, he's alleging this huge company is breaking the law He's an insider. The New York Times says he probably has documents that are relevant to the case, important stuff. He's a complete thorn in the side of OpenAI, one of the fastest growing apps or services, I don't know what to qualify it as, on Earth. Think about how much money was in that thing at that moment. And then he's found dead. Suchir's parents last heard from their son on November 21st, 2024, while he was on a backpacking trip on his birthday with a few friends on Catalina Island, right off the coast of LA. After he stopped responding to text messages on November 22nd, his mother, Ramarao, went to his apartment from her home in Union City on November 25th, but no one answered the door. When she called later that day and asked the police to do a wellness check, they told her a parent needed to be present before they could open his door. She then filed a missing person complaint in Union City the next day, then went back to her son's San Francisco apartment and waited for the police to arrive. After they came and went into the apartment, Ramarao waited hours for someone to tell her what was going on. At this point, Suchir's mom stated that she, quote, hoped to hear that he wasn't there, that he was off on a trip and just didn't want to talk or had lost his cell phone, end quote. But when a white van that wasn't an ambulance pulled up in front of his apartment building and pulled out a stretcher, her heart sank. On November 26, 2024, the police had found Suchir Balaji dead in his apartment from a single wound to the head. Now, paramedics pronounced Suchir dead at 1:20 p.m. and his mother, Ramarao, stated that, quote, the team from the medical examiner's office spent about only 40 minutes in Balaji's apartment, end quote. At 4 p.m., they gave her the keys to the apartment and told her she could collect her son's body the following day, and she did. A San Francisco office of the chief medical examiner autopsy report was released on February 14, 2025, which stated that Suchir Balaji had died of a single gunshot wound on the day that the police had found him. He had unalived himself. The gun that was found was registered to Suchir, and he had purchased it in January of 2024. Toxicology results showed that he had both alcohol and amphetamines in his system at the time of his death. Due to his purported whistleblower status as a custodial witness in the New York Times' lawsuit against OpenAI and his claims that OpenAI and other large technology companies violated AI copyright laws and maintained poor AI ethics standards, Suchir's death immediately attracted widespread public and media interest. The news
Suchir Balaji was 26 years old, originally from Cupertino, California. He joined OpenAI around 2020 or 2021 and worked on projects like GPT-4 and WebGPT. In August 2024, he left the company citing ethical concerns. He publicly criticized OpenAI's use of copyrighted materials and questioned whether its practices qualified as fair use. Shortly before his death, his name appeared in a New York Times lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft as a custodian of documents relevant to
interest. The news coverage also drew attention to his original essay outlining his legal arguments against OpenAI. Writing in an online eulogy, Schulman, one of the reps from OpenAI, claimed that, quote, Suchir's contributions to this project were essential and it wouldn't have succeeded without him, end quote. A memorial was held for Suchir and his family at the India Community Center in Milpitas, California, not far from his hometown of Cupertino. But despite the preliminary statements from San Francisco authorities describing Suchir's death as a self-unaliving, the circumstances of his death and a lack of detailed intimation from authorities led to widespread speculation and conspiracy theories suggesting that Suchir had been deliberately silenced before he could testify against OpenAI. That idea gained momentum after it was promoted by Suchir Balaji's family themselves, who campaigned publicly to raise awareness of what they see as an inaccurate verdict from San Francisco authorities. According to a Fortune article published in February 2025, on January 31st, Suchir's parents filed a lawsuit against the San Francisco police in order to gain access to the full report, to which they did the first week of February in a 4-page joint response to the lawsuit. Included was a 13-page report from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, and in the report, the determination still pressed that Suchir had died by self-unaliving and pronounced that the investigation into his death had been officially closed. According to the medical examiners, there were no signs of injuries or bruising on Suchir's body, and there were no signs of forced entry into his apartment. The single door leading into his apartment was found with the deadbolt locked, and the windows were not, quote, accessible points of entry, end quote, as they only opened approximately 4 inches. They said that the internet searches conducted from Balaji's computer prior to his death focused on aspects of brain anatomy. Gunshot residue particles were also detected on both of his hands. The toxicology report found the presence, like I said before, of both ethanol, an indicator of alcohol consumption, as well as amphetamines. The bullet had a front to back and downward trajectory, as if he had fired at himself from vertically from the forehead. Kind of like this. And finally, in this report, they stated the OCME found no evidence or information to establish a cause and manner of death for Mr. Balaji other than a by self wound to the head. SFPD conducted an independent investigation, and based on the information SFPD reviewed, there is insufficient evidence to find Mr. Balaji's death was the result of a homicide. End quote. They did not respond to further requests for comment. As of April 2025, the San Francisco Police Department and the San Francisco Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, David Hellman, and Executive Director of the Medical Office, David Sewell, still stand by their decision that Balaji himself. But despite the SF-OCME decision, Suchir's parents had their own private investigations conducted, and they even had a second autopsy performed, which they claimed shows evidence of a homicide. They also started a public awareness campaign to question the medical examiner's initial findings, buoyed by 2 independent reports they commissioned from forensic investigators that they say raise questions about the nature of their son Suchir's death. Amongst other evidence, they mentioned that Suchir had been in an incredibly cheerful mood for the 2 weeks prior to his death, stating that he had been courting funders for a nonprofit he planned to create and had just recently returned from a backpacking trip with his friends. There was also the lack of a note, and there were anomalous blood spots in his apartment. Ramarao, Suchir's mother, had hired a crime scene investigator to take a look at the evidence in Suchir's apartment, Dr. Dinesh Rao of Jamaica, and he called for a re-examination of the apartment, saying in his report that, quote, the crime scene examination is inadequate and incomplete and unscientific, end quote. In an interview with journalist Sagarika Mitra, Ramarao also reported that when they saw the picture of Suchir's body, there seemed to be evidence of someone spitting and coughing blood outside of the bathroom. So, how could that have happened? Finally, they claimed that the autopsy showed an impossible bullet travel path for a self-unaliving, and this was also disputed by their lawyer. Suchir's parents theorized that their son was attacked from behind while he was listening to music and cleaning his teeth, and his head was smashed into the wall or cabinet. Ramarao explained this in greater detail during her interview with Tucker Carlson. Take a look.
You also said, if I heard you correctly, that he had another head injury not caused by a bullet.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Actually, it appeared to us that from his fallen toothpick and blood in the sink and all that, it appeared around 10-ish. Because 10:10 is his last browser history on the desktop. He was brushing his teeth before going to bed. He was attacked from behind on the head. That's why there's fallen dustbin, there's fallen toothpick, and his earbud has fallen in 2 different directions because of the head impact. And we believe after that he was either electrocuted or he was, he was paralyzed from the head injury, and then they just held him up, made him sit, and shot him.
Additionally, investigative journalist James Webb also went on to explain the potential scenario in an interview with James Lee. Take a look.
Physical evidence is he's standing by the sink in his own bathroom, 835 square feet apartment in the Haight district of...
If you've made it this far, thank you. We're a new channel, and our goal isn't to push wild theories. It's to look at what's out there, break it down, and ask the questions that don't get asked often enough. This case, the passing of Suchir Balaji, is tragic, complicated, and still unfolding. We're not here to tell you what to believe. We're here to show you what we're seeing and open the door for discussion. If you found this useful, like, or even if you just found it thought-provoking, consider subscribing for more vids. That's it for this video. Make sure to get notified for part 2 Saturday night.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye for now.